We've had some traffic problems here with Marco Zappacosta, so he's stuck in traffic. And so, fortunately, we have Jed Katz here.
We'll play the role of Marco today.
Yes. We won't roll that video. You look different, Marco. So actually, Jed is very relevant because Jed was the first Series A investor in Marco's company. So Marco won Vator Splash, or won the Vator's very first startup competition in 2009. He had about several $100,000, and he had several $100,000 invested in the company, and he had 2,500 service providers. And so just to get Jed in the conversation here, why don't you just tell everybody what Thumbtack is, or does?
Sure. I'm curious, how many people have heard of Thumbtack prior to today? Okay, great. Thumbtack is a service for hiring any type of service professional, whether it's a DJ, a photographer, someone to repave your driveway, anything household related, basically any category you can imagine. You go onto the site, you list the project that you want to do, and service professionals in your area that are qualified to do that project bid for your business. They go on the platform, they list their rates, their qualifications, their testimonials, their ratings, whatever, and you choose which one to work with. And they're actually spending money to bid on your project. So they're serious about you. They're all qualified professionals, and it works extremely well. It's a much better system to get a service pro than just getting a list of them and starting to call them and waiting for them to call you back and going through that whole mess.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. So I also want to say that I want to open this up to questions early on, and you can ask Jed questions as also just from an investor perspective what he looks for, because he is a very, very tough Series A investor. You need a high threshold, high bar. So what was it? I mean, it was 2012 you made that investment in Thumbtack, correct? Was it
2011 or 12?
2011 or 2012?
It was around there, yeah.
Were they making revenue already? Did you need them to?
There was some revenue, but they were still figuring out their business model. There was adjustments to make, but look, we loved the founders right off the bat. We loved how data-oriented they were and how they studied the different elements of both sides of the marketplace they were building and could make adjustments along the way. Loved the concept of it, loved the market size, the potential. Really had just great conversations with them from the very beginning.
Okay, to ask questions, remember, go to slido.com and then type in #VatorSplash Oakland, and we should have some of the questions up there. So what Jed was saying is that when you go to Thumbtack, you can put in sort of your request. So for instance, I just recently did this. I needed a contractor, and I put in exactly what I needed, how many square footage I needed to remodel. And I didn't put in a budget though, but I was able to put something in, and I got 10 requests back, 10 bids back. And I'm curious, is that, how often, how many, do you, I don't even know if you know the details of this, but I'm just wondering from a consumer standpoint, I mean, what percentage of all those requests actually get completed or transacted?
So I'm not sure exactly what they publicize and what they don't. I can tell you that customers are happy when they get 3 bids. Okay, so you getting 10 is a really high number, actually. Mm-hmm. It's maybe that's too many, I'm not sure. But in general, when they get 3, they're really happy. And normally they're getting bids within the first few hours, sometimes within the first few minutes, but within 24 hours they'll have all the bids usually.
Well, I think 10, I mean, look, I don't really like options. I actually don't like shopping around, so fewer options, better for me. But I think there's some people out there who do like to go to Yelp or Angie's List and get a list of service providers to see all the different providers and see a lot of the reviews. And so one thing about Thumbtack that's great is that they deliver, you know that the person is serious, you know that the service providers are serious, but some of them don't have the length of reviews as, let's say, something like the a Yelp or an Angie's List would have. And sometimes it's nice, especially if you're really going to give them a big project, it's nice to have those reference checks. I mean, is that something Thumbtack will be doing?
They're collecting massive numbers of reviews right now.
Okay.
And I think what you normally see when you get multiple bids is, some have more reviews than others, and it's pretty easy to tell who's very well liked and who does great work. Angie's List has been around for longer, but having a list has a lot of disadvantages too, because a lot of times it's very tough to get in touch with people.
Yeah.
And you call and leave messages, and you're not sure who's available and who's not. Overall, I would much rather have the Thumbtack model than the Angie's List model.
Well, I think one thing that Marco mentioned to me was that there's one of the things he'd like to do is to be able to give all of the requests those 3 bids. And so to really get more suppliers, and there's tons of demand from consumers, and he really needs to go out there and get more suppliers. What is he doing or what have you advised him to do to go out there and get more service providers on this platform?
It's spreading like crazy, to be honest. And, we're talking about a lot of categories and a lot of geographies. And, I think first and foremost, we're making it just a great experience for both sides so that word spreads. There is going to be a bigger marketing campaign that starts shortly. And, you'll see some of that pretty soon. But just by the nature of focusing so hard on the user experience and the Service Pro experience, it's completely spread virally. Almost entirely so far, their growth has been through word of mouth and through a very sophisticated SEO strategy.
Okay, so a lot of it, yeah. Well, SEO is very important, I guess, but especially when you're putting in contractor and Google, you basically look at the first 3, right? The first 3 contractor, Oakland. That's how you find them.
People tend to put in longer strings of words for specific projects they're working on, but also I think there's just been a lot written about Thumbtack. In tons of local newspapers across the country, and we've been able to provide some great data on certain things, which provide great content as well.
You've been data? What were you talking?
We've been able to show how certain things are working, how trends might be going in different communities around the country, which has resulted in a lot of people talking about and writing about Thumbtack.
Oh, okay. So what's happening in these different communities? And by the way, everybody, I think let's all give Jed a round of applause because I plucked him out of the audience. I mean, this is the show. And he's doing amazing.
Yeah.
He gets 3 bottles of wine.
I guarantee you, Marco knows a lot more about his business than I do, but I'll do the best I can.
Well, so when Marco started, and marketplace businesses are tough. It's really hard to do. I remember when we have a video of Marco, actually, we wanted to show it because this was 5 years ago when Marco first pitched on this stage and we grilled him. And the thing we grilled him on, and what we grill every marketplace on, is how do you get the chicken and egg working? And one of the things he said was that he gave free software. So he was focusing on the suppliers, those are the service providers, the general contractors, carpet cleaners. And what he did was he was giving away free software to them. So absent any value of the marketplace, meaning meeting customers, he wanted to be able to at least give the suppliers some value. So do you think it worked out for him? Do you recall?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, that's just one of many tactics to get the service pros starting to use the platform at the same rate that the consumers were starting to use the platform. And remember, this is across a lot of categories and a lot of geographies. So to create this type of a marketplace so that it works nationwide like this was a remarkable feat. And he had already made a lot of progress on that by the time we met him. And it was one of the most impressive things from the very beginning.
And then one of the things that he did, which I think is incredible, Marco told me that he switched business models 3 times. And in fact, he switched business models when he had $2 million in revenue. So he was generating $2 million in annual revenue, and he decided to switch business models and give up that revenue, which is incredible. Did you invest in him at that time?
Yeah, we've been through a few switches, but I think of it as an evolution of the model to the point where it's the most scalable and brings the best experience to both sides of the marketplace. And I think we have landed on something that's just working wonderfully.
I'll talk a little bit about that model. It's sort of a pay-per-quote model.
It is. The service pros buy credits, and they can spend those credits to bid on projects, and different projects are worth different credits. For instance, a house cleaning project that might be a weekly or monthly thing for years is worth a little more than a one-time photography project. So they've kind of, it's really a exercise in data science and studying which categories are worth what in what geography, and kind of, pulling levers and pushing buttons to make sure that you're getting to the right mix for each one. And there's, many, many thousands of combinations that we're talking about.
Do you know, because I imagine as a service provider, my bid comes in for a contracting business, and they must be wondering, I have to pay for that credit. Do you know how much they ultimately end up paying to finally land a job? Like how many, how many?
That's the type of thing. I mean, I'm not going to give you specific answers, but that is the type of thing that the company studies religiously.
Yeah.
And they make adjustments. But the whole point is that it's such a clear win for both sides that the service pros don't even have to think about that, because it's just a phenomenal deal they're getting. If they land 1 in 5 or whatever the actual ratio is, it's just such a clear win.
Yeah, I think Marco told me that it actually works out to be about 5% of what the actual job is. So it's about, so that's a pretty good fee.
Yeah, I mean, I've done about 10 projects on it, and my most recent one was doing some repaving of my driveway, and it was a pretty, it was over $1,000 project, and there were multiple bids on it, and the person who won, I think they paid like roughly $6 or something like that, to win a $1,000 project.
So let's switch gears a little bit about sort of the market, where he is, where Thumbtack is available. They're not available internationally, and there's a lot of opportunity there. Why? Do you know why they haven't grown, or why you're not advising them to grow internationally?
For the moment, there is just too much to do here. It's a massive market in the U.S. alone. I won't speak to future plans right now. I'll let Marco cover that. But I can tell you that we have our hands full with the growth the company's experiencing, and all the things that we want to do to improve the product and the user experience.
Now we saw Amazon and Google announce that they were going to move into this market, and of course that's a validation. That's a pretty big one. But how are you advising Marco to make sure he doesn't lose any market share or momentum now that these guys are in the business?
Momentum has only increased with the company. You're putting me on dangerous ground here to comment on the competition. I should let Marco do that. I will say that they're going about it in different ways, and they're different products. I will say that Thumbtack's been working on this for a long time, and we have a pretty big staff on it. And it is a difficult, complicated problem to really nail it. Again, because of the complexity of getting both sides of that marketplace right for so many categories and so many geographies. And I think as people try to do it, they're going to realize kind of how hard it is. But I can tell you that the momentum at Thumbtack has only been increasing.
Okay. Well, we're also going to just talk to Jed about just being a VC, because I feel like I'm talking about someone behind his back, like talking. Don't you feel like I'm doing that? I mean, Jed is an amazing venture capitalist. He's on his, what fund are you now?
We're about halfway through our third fund.
Halfway through our third fund. It's $150 million fund.
The current fund is $125 million. In total, we manage about $340 million.
He's also an accomplished entrepreneur. He founded Rent.com?
RentNet and Move.com.
Right, and they were sold. They were acquired as well. So very established entrepreneur, very established VC. You would be honored to have a meeting with Jed, but super, he seems like a nice guy, but he's really, really tough underneath that nice exterior. Don't let
Did I
that
shoot you down on a business idea or something?
I think so. Like
Not that tough.
I'm kidding. So, but does anyone have any questions about just fundraising in general? How many people here are fundraising? Okay, Dolly. What questions do you have about fundraising?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So how can I give investors over their concern about their lack of expertise?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. She's asking, with a product that's more consumer focused, how do you find the right investor group and get them, over the hump when a lot of the stuff they're looking at is more. So is it not technology based? Is it more of a
Technology based, but it's still a consumer product. It's not a digital or platform software play.
right?
It's a fashion play, reinventing shoe manufacturing and shoe technology.
Actually, I've been amazed in the last couple of years how many things have been funded that are that type of thing. It uses uses technology to make a kind of a non-technology thing run a lot better. So I think there are a lot of investors open to that. We've actually been doing more e-commerce in the last 12 months than we've done in the last 4 years. So there's a lot of it getting funded. I wouldn't be discouraged at all.
Just starting out,
Yeah.
it's just one of the pieces of feedback that's outside my expertise. So
Right.
one of the things I was
I mean, you still have to prove that you can make this very big. It's a scalable business. It's not going to take a ridiculous amount of capital to make it big. Your team can take it really far.
Yeah, and there's a lot happening in fashion, right? There's a lot happening with wearables, and as Mark Andreessen has said, that software is eating the world. So I think that if you talk to a number of investors, they are looking for greenfield opportunities, agriculture, just different opportunities, not your typical enterprise software. They're looking, I was talking to Dave Samuel. He invested in toilet bowls. So nobody's
We
innovating
will always
there.
need toilet bowls.
Yeah, but it's not a sexy business, and so somebody's got to innovate across these areas. So actually, in many ways, that's an advantage for you.
We invested in Truemaker last year, which is men's clothing. So it's probably something similar.
absolutely great feedback. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Any other question? Any entrepreneur type of questions about fundraising, Series A, fundraising? That's always the tough one. How many here are trying to raise a Series A? Did I already ask that question? How many here are building marketplaces? Okay. So do you have any questions about building your marketplace?
Unfortunately, I get multiple questions. So marketplace is about the buy side and the sales side. So from your perspective, where do you want to start focus on first?
Well, so he said marketplaces are buy side, sell side. Where do we want to focus on first? And I guess we should focus on where.
I think about it a little differently. It's more about the pace at which you can grow both sides. Okay, and what is the right ratio of of one side to the other, right? Because if you have too many of one side and not enough of the other, it's going to fall apart. There's a few marketplaces where it makes so much sense to start with one side and then go after the other side. I'd have to know more about your what exactly your marketplace is, but I would think that you kind of pace it so both sides keep growing.
But we would start with the supply side first too, though, right? No, at least.
I started a marketplace. The real estate sites I did. RentNet was the first online apartment guide, and in order to get people to come to RentNet, we had to have a lot of apartment buildings advertising on it. But in order for the apartment buildings to advertise on it, we had to have a lot of people looking at it. And so we really had to time the marketing to get the users at the right pace in each geography as we got the apartment buildings to sign up.
He wants to have a meeting with you.
I'll think about it. Yeah, well, just contact me afterwards and tell me
What
what you're
kind of
working on.
marketplace?
It's a marketplace for first-time parents.
For first-time parents? I'm not sure what that means, so we'll have to talk further. Yeah.
First-time parents. Okay, and then somebody else had his hand up there for you're building a marketplace, right? Yes, do you have any questions about marketplaces and getting the flywheel going?
Yeah, I guess it was a little addressed earlier. I have more of a question about how to try it and test it and to have more of a proof that there's demand when you're trying to scale, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure I understand the question, actually.
So where I'm at is I have enough proof that there's a demand,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trying to scale it beyond that.
Yeah, is that just a funding need, or are you trying to figure out which tactics to use to make both sides grow faster? Yeah, I mean, that is, whenever anybody comes to us and is raising money for a marketplace, they don't have to have all the answers, but we will have assumed at that point that they understand some of the best tactics to increase both sides of the marketplace, and they're looking for more fuel. Certainly we'll help them come up with a lot more tactics, but it can't be stuck. You have to show that there is some growth, and you've kind of figured out some of the buttons to press to make it grow.
Any other questions? So I'll switch gears here. We started today talking about unicorns, and I think that's sort of a hot button term right now. Unicorns. I can't remember what the other one is above unicorns, which is a $10 billion company. But I guess I could just make up that word since that one was made up anyway.
You could coin a word right now.
Yeah. Tunicorn, $10 billion company. So I guess the question is, I mean, how much do you, there is a lot of conversation around the valuation of these companies and how they're not going to survive. And I guess, I don't know, are we putting too much emphasis now on valuation? I mean, a lot of these companies are, a lot of these companies are pretty much worth it, more so than, let's say, 10 years ago. So I guess sometimes I think we get caught up with these valuation numbers too much, and maybe that's a good thing, so we don't get get too overhyped. But maybe we should move the conversation off from the unicorns and move it toward something a little bit more relevant and something that that's useful.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there's a lot of private capital at the growth stages that are paying high valuations, and they want in on these companies before they go public, and it extends the time that the companies can grow and kind of get all of their stuff together before they go public, which is probably good. But you're right, it's totally unlike 10 years ago, because most of the companies that are getting these giant valuations are real awesome companies. They're not going away. I mean, Uber's not going away anytime soon. Right. So, whereas 10 years ago, there were a lot of big valuations where, there was still so much that had to be figured out, and those companies could just disappear. I can tell you with Thumbtack, it's still at the very early stages of a massive growth curve. And so, we feel kind of really good at how the world is valuing them and kind of what happens next.
I think it's funny because I remember Google was $24 billion when it went public in 2004, and that was a 6-year-old company. Now we're talking about companies that are 10 years old and $1 billion, and I think there's just more transparency in these companies because there's more of them. There's 100 of them that are private. And if they were public, I don't think we would be. I mean, I think, what was it? Is it Zulilly's worth, 1 times revenue, $1 to $2 billion? I mean, nobody looks at Zulilly and says, hey, that's overvalued. But just because they're a private company and they're $1 billion, I think people forget that they're 10 years old. 8 to 10, I mean, they're pretty old, these companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the valuations have to do with just growth rate. And how much, what's after this? What do the next 5 years look like for this company? Is it going to be able to still, double and triple and go into other areas? Also, some of it's about just strategic importance. You know, are they building something that is going to be important to the biggest players in the ecosystem? And what does that mean? You know, you look at, you know, a few years ago, Instagram. Well, as soon as they got like the kind of volume of users they got, you knew it was important. That's where people were going to exchange photos. They were going to get a big valuation. Even, you know, they weren't even generating revenue at that point, but it was strategically important.
What?
Look at this, Marco.
Oh, my goodness. Marco, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay,
Apologize for
I've
being
done my
late.
best Marco imitation for the last half hour.
Well, I was worried. I hurried when you were doing that.
well, Marco, Jed and I are having a perfectly fine conversation now. I'm kidding. You can join us.
Well, you guys can keep going.
No. I actually would love to show. Who would like to see a video of Marco when he was pitching us on stage 5 years ago? Here he is. Look how young he is.
He was 11 years old
He
at
was
this point.
15, I think. Go ahead. Let's see it.
Thumbtack is building an online marketplace for local services to change the way you find and book services. Right now, you can go online and buy any product you can think of, but you can't do the same for services. I'm sure many of you had the experience that it's incredibly difficult to find a local, trustworthy, and available provider to come and do the jobs that you need done. Thumbtack addresses this problem by creating a two-sided marketplace where providers put up their profiles with availability and consumers can find them and book them. Now, to get over the chicken and the egg problem, what we're doing is giving away small business software like appointment management and CRM and marketing tools and marketing products that we can buy at scale and resell to them, giving them a place to come independent of the value of the marketplace as a whole. And this way they spend their time and effort to acquire their customers that they know better than we do anyway. Ultimately, the revenue model is transactional. We would like to facilitate the buying and selling of services, and we will make money from that flow.
Maybe I'm a little bit biased here because I tested out a system. So I tested out a service and I actually did find a piano teacher, so I'm a little bit biased. I think it actually works. And I said, I did a great job.
Well, I have to say, I was one of the nicer judges on stage because I did find a piano teacher on Marcus. Do you remember that? They were pretty tough on you.
I remember Adeo being particularly tough, in fact.
He did not like how you were going to answer the chicken and egg problem. And I mentioned this to Jeg because you had 2,500 suppliers at that time, or service providers, and at the time you were giving away software, which Adeo said he just didn't like that process or that answer. And so how did that ultimately work out for you?
Worked great.
I mean, well, you pivoted a lot. But
I think the way it was explained there was a little gussied up relative to what it actually was. We built our small business customers a way to advertise themselves better online. And classified sites like Craigslist, on the web, they could put a badge on their website. And so it wasn't as full-featured as I described it or I was dreaming of it when we first talked about it, but it is actually what spun the marketplace up originally. These folks came to us and we gave them a simple and effective marketing solution that was outside of Thumbtack, and they liked that and they used it, and that's what got them to come at first.
well, 5 years later, there's 40 million service providers out there. How many service providers do you have today?
We probably have close to 1 million.
And adding about, you had 2,500 there, so adding what, 2,500 a week now? 2,500 a second, a day?
A day.
That's great. So tell me about, you told me one of the biggest challenges was raising your Series A. In fact, when I asked you, what was the time where you felt like, not the biggest risk, but with the time that you felt like it was like you almost were ready to give up. So how often did you knock on Jed's door to try to get him to invest in you? How was that process and what kept you going?
So, I mean, I think the main reason was that we simply didn't really know how to raise venture capital. And we went out before even we met or talked to Jed and Javelin trying to raise $10 or even $12 million. And that was exuberant. relative to what we'd accomplished. And so we just had misset expectations. And so we went out, talked to a bunch of people trying to raise 10 or 12, and realized that that wasn't going to work for a very simple and fair reason, which is that the monetization piece of the business was early. I think there was some data, and I think enough to convince Jed and Javelin that, you know, there was something really here, but it was early days in terms of monetization. And I think with the original ask that we hadn't proved enough to go take that much money down. We sort of recalibrated, and then I think, you know, thankfully for Javelin and a few other folks who got interested, it worked.
Yeah, you know, so a little background on Marco. So he, actually this is his first startup, and he graduated with neuroscience political science degree. So when I asked him about sort of what keeps him going, he sort of said, I didn't really know what I knew. Like if I knew what I was getting into, then it would have been tougher. So in many ways, sometimes when it's all new to you, sometimes you don't know what the big challenges are.
I mean, ignorance can be very helpful. I mean, I think in our case, actually, a lot of our success is due to not actually knowing any better, not realizing that you couldn't create a self-serve advertising solution for small businesses, that you couldn't actually create a new way for hiring local services. Like these were all things that people believed at the time, but we didn't know any better. And turned out that the timing had changed and the realities had changed. You could build these things now.
So so entrepreneurs out there, a lot of times when you're an investor, sometimes you want to see somebody with experience. And you know, Marco had a degree in political science. His buddies were all young. They just got out of college. No one knew. I mean, you know, you don't need a political science degree and a neuroscience degree to put customers and plumbers together, right? You don't need that. So did you feel like they needed somebody with that experience? Because that's pretty good for a lot of these guys who don't have experience in certain industries.
I think when we invest in young entrepreneurs, they have certain qualities that are really attractive. I mean, they were, you know, these guys will be humble about it, but Marco and his partner are brilliant guys, and they were very hungry to build something significant. As I said before, very data-oriented. The way they talked about the market and understood, you know, who the customers were, and how a marketplace could be built. Even though they didn't have all the answers, it was just a really fun conversation, and we liked the guys right off the bat. So they were, what can I say? They were just our type of entrepreneurs.
We're going to extend this for about 5 more. We have about 5 minutes left, I believe. I don't see a time here, so 2 minutes. So maybe we'll just extend it a little bit longer. So if anybody has any questions, I guess the Slido is not working. So if you do, for Marco, please come on up and go ahead and go up to the mics or just raise your hand so you can ask him some questions. But one of the, what's really, oh, there they are. Okay, so I do want to ask him about the business model, though, because I think it's important for a lot of entrepreneurs to understand that, because you grapple with how to, what kind of business model you should have. So, and Marco's had 3 of them. And he also had one that was generating $2 million, and then he dropped it and moved to something else. So I want him to talk about his sort of thought process behind a marketplace business model, and why the decisions behind, and why he made those decisions.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was because we were sort of dumb or we weren't sort of seeing things correctly, but it took us 3 tries to get it right. And so when we came into it, as I sort of described in the video, we wanted to monetize the marketplace by charging a transaction fee. You looked at eBay and you looked at these other marketplaces, and that was the sort of normal, quote unquote, monetization scheme. The challenge in our case, which made it much harder to pull off, is that these are real world transactions. Plumbers coming to your house, and therefore staying in the loop, knowing, you know, when they actually came, how much the job actually closed for, is very tricky. And that made it hard for us to get in the middle of that. There was actually an even more fundamental issue, which was that we were helping customers hire by giving them options. And when you don't charge a professional anything for getting in touch with a customer, they tend to respond to all of them. So commission model didn't work. We then put in place a subscription model, which is actually when we met Jed, and we had that. And the reason we focused on it was because it was clear, it was easy to explain, it was easy for the professional to evaluate, and it worked. So I think at our height, we had 12,000 paying subscribers, 2 or 3 million in recurring revenue. But
They were paying $20 a month.
yeah, I think it was $24 a month, something like that. But the challenge there was that it didn't scale with the activity of the marketplace. If we doubled the number of customers, doubled the number of dollars we were driving these professionals, we weren't making any more money. And also, in the reverse case, when the professionals, say, went on vacation or had a bunch of business from past customers, they wanted to turn us off. But with the subscription, it was always on. And so we were either overcharging or undercharging, but never right charging these professionals. And so about a year after Jed and Javelin got involved, we made the decision to turn off the subscription model and turn on our introduction-based model. Now, we'd done a lot of testing around it, so we felt good about it, but it's still scary to move over a whole population and community over to a new business model. It was super scary, but thankfully it worked, and it was definitely the right thing, and it propelled us forward.
So another, okay, 2 minutes. So one of the other challenging things as a startup or early on, besides trying to figure out what your business model is and the right business model, is just competition around you. And I remember when we crowned Thumbtack as the winner, there was another very similar marketplace called Red Beacon, getting tons of press. I could feel it because, of course, I was a big fan of Thumbtack. But you know, there's a lot of pressure when you're seemingly not the one getting the attention. And so, how did that feel when somebody else was getting all the love, particularly in the press? And how did you handle that? How do you handle that as an entrepreneur?
Well, it sucked, right? It was somebody else getting all the love and admiration for effectively the same idea, and they came at it independently. It's not they didn't copy us in any way, but to their credit, they did a better job early on of building up some buzz around the business. In some ways, I actually think it was part of their demise and our success. So we, from the get-go, were very, very focused on building up our network of customers and professionals. Marketplaces, at the end of the day, are in the business of providing liquidity. They connect customers with professionals and professionals with customers, and that's all we focused on. To the extent that we didn't really focus on getting press here in San Francisco, and there were times where you really felt that, and it hurt seeing somebody else get press when you could have done it. But in the end, our focus on the marketplace and building liquidity to ultimately create a better solution was the right long-term choice. But it definitely left a chip on our shoulder, and one that motivated us.
And Red Beacon, by the way, was sold eventually after 2 or 3 years, and you just kept charging away. But for anybody here who doesn't know, does anybody have any questions for Marco? Oh yeah, of course, we have questions right there. I haven't seen, but somebody's raised his hand, and I lost the question, so.
Cool. Hey, so I'm curious, with the marketplace, obviously the more people you have, or the more contractors or whatever you have on the marketplace, the less control you have over the quality. I know, for example, with Elance and Odesk, someone can have 5 stars and have done 1 million jobs, but then you contract them and they're not really what was promised. How do you control for that to make the customer experience better?
Yeah, so I would push back a little bit on your premise. I don't think actually more makes it harder to control quality. And I think the challenge is the specificity of each customer's preference. It's not that everybody has the same quality bar or the same preferences. It's that everybody actually has different preferences. That's actually what makes this super hard. Because it's more straightforward to create a floor and keep everybody above that. It's actually much harder to find the right pro for each customer. And at the end of the day, the only real solution is applying a lot of data and then intelligence on top of that data. So this is one of the ways where I think we benefit from network effects, where the more professionals who are on the platform, the more usage we get, the more data we get about what they're good at, what they're rated to be sort of amazing at. Therefore, we can match more efficiently by understanding which customers they're a good fit for. So it kind of feeds into itself, and you have to learn. It's never done. It's never sort of one thing. There's not just one signal that you key off of. You kind of just look at everything you have and keep iterating and improving on it such that the matchmaking gets ever better. But actually, I think it benefits from scale rather than gets hindered by scale. Mm-hmm.
Marketplace person.
Marco, can you elaborate a little bit more about your introduction model versus the two models earlier?
Yeah.
And also, what are some of the challenges you've had when you transition your existing users from one model to the other? How do you solve those?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the first question was, can I expand on our introduction-based model? So we tried the commission, which is % of sale. We tried subscription, which was simply sort of being on the platform. And the introduction-based model is basically just that. We charge for introductions. So a customer comes to us, tells us what they need. We send that out to the relevant professionals who serve their area and perform that service. And if they want to get in touch, if they want to send a quote and get introduced to that customer, they pay us a fixed fee per category to do so. The great thing there is it gives the professional all the discretion. They see everything the customer wants, you know, the who, the what, the when, the where. And if they feel like they're a good fit and they can win that job, then they pay Thumbtack to be introduced, which actually increases the quality of the introductions because these professionals are qualifying themselves. And then your second question was, I'm sorry, could you please repeat it? Right. So our support staff love to say that their favorite professionals were the ones who had never heard of subscriptions. Because changing business models is a very jarring experience, and one that we try to handle carefully by messaging it well, providing ample sort of free credits, but it was rocky. You know, the people who were being undercharged loved it, loved the previous model, and so we're sad to see it go, right? The people who were being overcharged were already skeptical with us, and so they weren't just jumping into it either. The great thing is that Thumbtack was working. It was delivering these folks more customers and more business, and so they were motivated to see it out, to try it out, and see if they could actually make it work. And it did work, and it paid out great, and the ROI is even better, we believe, than before. So it just took sort of keeping their trust enough to get them to try it, because we knew if they tried it, it would stick.
I think this is one last question. This will probably also get into the future of Thumbtack. But Marco, you mentioned that one of the things you'd like to do at Thumbtack is to increase the number of bids for each request, do you call it? So to 3. I mentioned to Jed that I requested a contractor a couple weeks ago, ended up with 10, so that's pretty good. But you'd like to increase all of the requests to 3, and one way to do that is just really increase your supplier base. So even though you have the flywheel going, you have all the suppliers coming in, what are you going to do to get more service providers on your platform?
So the main reason professionals don't use Thumbtack is they've never heard of Thumbtack. So we do surveys. The people who use it love it and stick. So it's really a marketing effort. It's an awareness building effort. For the first time, we now have the capability to target incredibly specifically online, because it's not like we just need professionals generally. You know, we need math tutors in Tulsa and plumbers in Dallas and caterers in Atlanta. It's hyper local and hyper specific, and we've built that targeting system in-house to go out and buy the ads to attract these people. We're also soon, in a couple months, going to be testing sort of a big brand campaign in a couple cities. You know, the traditional TV, radio, bus ads, to continue to build awareness. That's the main impediment. We have to match more efficiently once they're on and get them the right jobs in the right order so that they learn how to use the system and get hired and stick. But the main challenge is just awareness.
Well, as you continue to I lied, I have one more question. As you continue to create more awareness, what are you going to do to fend off your market from Google and Amazon to big heavy hitters and small businesses as they move into your market? They already made that announcement this year.
So the reason they're interested in it is because it's big and it's broken. That's just a fact. But we've been working on this for the last 5.5 years, and we believe we have the best offering in the space. We have the most momentum, we have the most scale, and so it's on us to keep running and keep beating them. I think obviously both these companies have incredible brands and talent and money, but they aren't as focused on this problem as we have been. And so my view is they haven't learned all the hard lessons and done all the hard things to get it really right. So it's on us to keep it going. It's certainly scary and motivating, but we're in the right position. We just have to keep running.
And you're stubborn and relentless and persevere. I mean, this guy's nice, he's stubborn. I mean, those are the, so.
I think Jed's pretty stubborn sometimes too.
Yeah, no, he is stubborn. So, okay, we could sit here and talk for a long time. Of course, because Marco is just, it's so exciting to see his pitch and now coming up here and sharing his lessons.
Can you send me that video?
I
haven't seen that in a long time.
It has been a long time. Glad you got your hair cut.
I thought he was born with a beard, so I was just glad to see him without the beard for.
But I think he was literally, you must have been really young because you were in college, you were just out of college.
When was that?
That was 5 years ago.
Yes, I was 24.
Oh, okay, yeah. And look at you now. Okay, well, let's give Marco a big hand, please.
Thank you, sorry to be late.